Good afternoon. Welcome to Green Library's vendor room, which we use as a gentle person's reading room most of the time, but on occasions such as this, we're delighted to have people come and listen to some of us and listen especially to our visiting speakers. My name is Michael Keller. I'm the university librarian here, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this reception, which is both honoring and celebrating the handmade book, an exhibit that was and is the creature of Professor Elaine Traharn, who's sitting here, and her students, and the collegium about the handmade book that I guess has officially started somewhat earlier this month, but is now going to get into full swing in the succeeding couple or 3 days. My message to you all is that the role of scholars of the book, and particularly of medieval, early modern, even ancient books, is to explain them, to inform us of what they meant, what they were made for, as much as one can tell, and how they were made. So we have some inkling through the scholarship, the interpretation, the analysis, the deep understanding of looking at a lot of these objects that can be delivered by a scholar to all of us. And Elaine Traharn is a brilliant example of the person who does this so very well, and so very well in so many ways. She's also training students, and which is, of course, the noblest of all things that we do here, beyond the creation of new knowledge. What's interesting about this exhibit and this collegium is that it pairs scholars with artists who are making artist books. So in a way, the medieval book, the ancient book, the early modern book, the manuscript books of these earlier times are explained by our scholars to us, and they inform us so that we might have some understanding of what went on and how these books are made and what the texts are about and what the illuminations were and the rubrics and all the rest of that. What's interesting about this project, this exhibit, and this colloquium is that we are going to hear from contemporary artists who make books, books as art. So in a way, Elaine and company has set up a conversation between medieval books and modern books. And I think we may learn some new views of what went on and what is going on as a result of this pairing. It's really quite exciting. And the papers that will be given and received in the succeeding days, many of them will end up being published, and we will make sure that they're online and everybody can read them. So this is a I've never seen anything like this in our field. Congratulations and thank you, Elaine. It's wonderful. The keepsake, did the keepsake get passed out to everyone? Yes? Okay, so there is a lovely little keepsake. There's not going to be a catalog of this exhibit, so you can study each case very carefully. But if you get a copy of this, there are explanations and insights. And I want to take particular care to note Elaine's essay, which starts this keepsake, Book as Variety. And she works her way in this essay and then in the actual structure of the exhibit through books as variety. It's marvelous insight. And then one of your students has a lovely, I would say, journey, a brief journey through how medieval, ancient, early modern books were made and all the crafts and art that went into the making of these books. You can see examples of that in ways, but you need to read this essay so you get the whole picture of all the crafts and all the art that's involved. you know, the scribe, the rubricator, the illuminator, etc. There is another essay by Luca Masura. Luca, where are you? Please stand up. Luca is a book artist and a PhD candidate. And his essay is entitled, "What is an Artist Book?" And I will tell you that there aren't enough pages in this essay, Luca, to describe all the artists, what all the artist books are. Roberto Trujillo, my friend here, and the Associate University Librarian for Special Collections here, have been involved in something called the Codex Foundation. And every few years there'll be a Codex meeting, a seminar, a conference with people from all over the world coming, and more importantly, there's a book fair. And that book fair has become prominently important because of all the fine press printers and artist book makers who come there to show their wares and offer them for sale. And then finally, just as a kind of indicator to you all of the variety that Elaine has made for us, Case 1, book is technology. Case 2, book is inspiration. And I go through, I think, 18 cases. Case 17, book is portal. Case 18, book is facade. This is the variety of the book, and with examples of medieval, modern, early modern, ancient books, and modern artist books. So this is a journey you're going to take, an unusual journey. I've never seen or heard of anything like this. I think, again, we owe all the people who are involved in here, including, not least, Lauren Selden, who does the essay on the making of a medieval book, and Deidre Fuzel, who is responsible for mounting the exhibit in cooperation and at the will of Elaine Trahan. Thank you all very much. The next speaker will be my friend, Roberto Trujillo.
Well, my job is to, again, welcome you to Stanford, the university, the Stanford libraries, but more especially to Special Collections, where the exhibit is on right now. And I want to use a little phrase that I picked up from Elaine when I first met her, and it was because a lot of people ask me, what is the future of the book? And they ask that question because we're in a digital age. And Elaine's response to that was, well, the history of the book is the future of the book. And I just love that so much. And I always use it, and I always attribute it to Elaine because I should. But, you know, if you think about it, and as you go through this exhibit downstairs, look at the juxtaposition of the contemporary works with the antiquarian works, and think about why and how and when and by whom and for whom. And I think the exhibit that you can see downstairs is as much a teaching exhibit as it is anything. If you read all of the captions, if you look at that little book that Mike was talking about, if you read those essays, you can really learn things that you probably wouldn't otherwise know about. And I think that's really critical. When I first met Elaine, when she first came to Stanford, and we had lunch at the faculty club, and we were talking about what we were both interested in, and then it turns out that she was interested in the book as art. And I said, oh my goodness, are you having lunch with the right person today? It's become a pet interest of mine, and Mike mentioned the Codex Foundation that I'm a part of and have been since its inception. But the future of the book really is the history of the book, you guys, and that's really important. And Elaine's work with her students and with Ben and Deirdre to put on this show is particularly impressive. So Elaine, congratulations, and thank you. It's really quite something. We've had my office is very near the Rotunda exhibit area, and for the entire time that this show has been up, I see like little herds of students roaming around taking notes, and I've never seen that happen for any of our shows in the past. So I don't know if Elaine is making her students come and take notes or if other professors are doing that, but it has struck a nerve of some kind because people are looking and paying attention and taking notes, and so something is meaning something to them, and that's quite an accomplishment. So Elaine, thank you for that too. So again, welcome to Special Collections at Stanford Libraries, and welcome to the university. I think the crowd that's here today is probably a bit different from what we've had in the past, and I know that it's in part international and national and local, and so you are all most welcome to the Stanford Libraries. Thank you.
Well, thanks to Mike and to Roberto for that warm welcome, warm introduction, and thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate this wonderful exhibition. I'm Ben Albritton. I'm the Rare Books Curator in Special Collections, and I work for Roberto. To begin with, any endeavor like this can only happen with the input and hard work of a number of colleagues. I'd like to call out specifically Deirdre Fazell, who designed such an amazing display of the materials that were chosen for the exhibit, Wayne Vanderkool for exceptional and artistic photography of the items, Becky Fischbach for her help in getting the exhibit installed, and Sonia Lee, who has worked tirelessly to organize the event that's happening tonight. Claudia Stefanescu and Isabel Fryatt worked on describing and organizing many of the items. And finally, the co-curators of this exhibit, Lauren Selden, a history major in the Stanford class of 23, Luca Massaro, who we've already met, a wonderful English PhD and book artist in his own right, whose work you can see downstairs. And of course, Elaine Traharn, the Roberta Bowman Denning Professor of English, friend of the library, and one of the most generous and energetic collaborators one could hope for. Before I introduce Professor Traharn, who will in turn introduce our wonderful speaker tonight, I'd like to begin with a few thoughts on the exhibit and the series of events associated with it. 93 years ago, in 1926, Albert M. Bender and his friends donated 125 notable examples of fine printing to the library, a donation that formed the core of what would become our rare books collection, and a gift which was initiated by faculty and student interest and need. As he did with so many Bay Area institutions, Bender continued to generously contribute to Stanford, and his typographic collection grew over the years. To house this wonderful gift, in 1933, the room we're in tonight became the first rare books room for the library, housing 600 books from the typographic collection and about twice that many other rare books, some of which are in the exhibit downstairs. The collection was overseen by the newly minted Keeper of Rare Books, Jeanette Hitchcock, a Stanford graduate with the drive and conviction to formalize and organize special collecting at our still young California institution. By 1938, she had converted this former storage space into a well-appointed special collections reading room, replete with a printing press, which you can still see in the rotunda downstairs, upholstered chairs, and display cases to showcase Bender's many material gifts to the library and to the program of book history and book arts at Stanford, a room which was renamed the Albert Bender Room to honor our benefactor. That initial focus here on book arts, sparked by Albert Bender, encouraged by the head librarian Nathan Van Patten, was fully ignited, if you'll pardon a fire-related metaphor for rare books collecting, with the gift of Morgan and Aileen Gunst, who not only contributed their own substantial book arts collection, but also provided the library with a gift that allowed the creation of the Gunst Library of the Book Arts, which brought together all of our fine press and book arts materials in a single collection. Their endowed fund for the book arts has been carefully stewarded by my colleague Roberto Trujillo for the last 30 years to help build a particularly fine collection of contemporary artist books, which many of you will have become familiar with in previous library exhibitions, and which feature many works by many of the artists who are here with us tonight. Now to Professor Traharn. I first met Elaine some 16 years ago over a cup of tea in the Parker Library in Cambridge on what I recall as a rather drizzly and gray, very non-Californian morning. She was working on some of the Old English manuscripts in the collection, and I was doing metadata for a library project. At the time, I was struck by her generosity with ideas, with her thoughts about manuscripts, and particularly her personal connection to each of the centuries-old handmade books she had out that day, almost as if they were old friends of hers, each quirk, each choice made in production, communicating something to her across the ages. We eventually found our separate paths to Stanford, and it has been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to build a collaborative scholarly relationship over the last decade. Watching her delve through our book history and book arts collections during the development of this exhibition demonstrates exactly why we hold materials like this in our research collections. By juxtaposing books produced across geographic areas and chronological periods with many aesthetic and practical goals, she has created a space that not only forces us to critically consider the technologies and goals of book production, but also argues strongly for our institution to continue to collect handmade books in the heart of technology-focused Silicon Valley, and to continue the community that Albert Bender helped to foster nearly a century ago to bring together Stanford faculty, students, donors, researchers, and librarians in the study and celebration of books in their endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful. It is my deepest pleasure to introduce to you now Professor Elaine Traharn, Roberta Bowman-Denning Professor of English, and the creative force behind the exhibit we are proud to share with you all tonight. Elaine?
This cascade of speakers, but we're nearly there. So it's my duty and a pleasure to introduce the speaker. But of course, I want to thank you all for being here this evening to celebrate the Handmade Book exhibition, which has been such a joy to work on and to see fulfilled through the 18 packed cases that highlight the profundity of the book and its infinite variabilities. Now, the objects speak for themselves, but I have to say that the vision of Deirdre Fussell, our exhibitions officer, has allowed the books and documents to dazzle, and her beautiful posters and images have brought a dynamism to our lovely exhibition space that has, in actuality, stopped students and visitors in their tracks. I'm immensely grateful to Vice Provost Mike Keller, Stanford University librarian and ally in all the escapades I plan that involve deep collaboration with my librarian colleagues. And chief among these, as we know now, are Roberto Trujillo here, and of course, Dr. Ben Albritton, co-curator of the exhibition and co-director with me of the newly formed Stanford Manuscript Sciences. It has been the greatest pleasure of my Stanford tenure to work alongside these experts to research and share the longevity and multiplicity of form and potential of the book writ large. And it would be remiss of me not to also call out one other person for thanks in this long kind of chain of thankfulness. But actually my undergraduate student, Ayup Eren Urek, who's sitting over there and who will wave, or at least stand for us, Eren. Has been an absolutely extraordinary supporter and helper in the whole duration of organising this conference. He and I have put together what will come in the next few days, and thank you, Eren. It's wonderful to work with you. So this is a liminal moment, and I actually do mean liminal in the proper sense as a threshold, as we prepare for the closure of the exhibition at the end of next week on the 5th of February. So we begin 3 days of joyful discussion of the handmade book. Sponsored by the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute, our conference will be thinking about the idiosyncrasy and unexpectedness of the handcrafted and the artisanal. How would any artificial intelligence detail the uncategorizable and the many uncertainties that emerge from unique artifacts? Among the most unique and aesthetically rich artistry that you're likely to see is Joumana Medlej's extraordinary work. I first encountered her Book of the Moon on exhibition in the British Library Ritblatt Gallery as part of its display of treasures. That same book, well actually our copy of the book, but the same small print edition, is in our exhibition, where you can see its detail of the phases of the moon influenced by medieval Islamic astronomical charts and highlighted by zodiacal signs and Arabic lettering. The colours that Joumana achieves in her art are stunning, and her conception of the book as wearable, talismanic, and catching time demands close attention and appreciation. But this is just one of a panoply of art and writing that juxtaposes old and new, cross-temporal and cross-spatial in its imaginary. Joumana's website, which I urge you all to look at, is a virtual demonstration of her range, skill, and broad artistic, historical, and linguistic expertise. Joumana's influences are from Sufi texts, ancient cultures, Jungian psychology, the forms of letters, the survival of myths. Her breadth extends from comic books to translation, graphic design, and the mastery of complex hand lettering. A love of the geometric and playfulness of form marks her work, along with the ability to illuminate whatever she creates, entrancing the eye and lifting the mind. To see her work is to realise the promise of colour and the imagination, and to exploit the beauty of the book in all its artfulness. There is so much more to say, and I can talk for a long time about Joumana's work and book artistry. What I'll do, though, is take a hint from her title, The Art of Letting Go. And I'm going to hand over and welcome, I'm so delighted to welcome Joumana Medlej for her lecture this evening. Joumana.
Wow, thank you, Elaine. Lost my voice there for a moment. Hi, everybody, and wow, thank you so much for coming. So, this is very different from giving a talk on Zoom, I can tell you. Spoiler there. Okay. So I was asked to talk about my work under the banner of uncertainty and the handmade, which for a moment I thought was meant to be summing up my life, but what I want to talk about is the aspect of knowingly giving up a certain measure of control over a creation in order for something else to happen. In other words, embracing uncertainty as a creator, and not the financial and existential uncertainty which every creator can relate to, which is very real, but speaking about the materials, not trying to control every aspect of what we do. And for me, this comes with a return to historical materials or natural materials that are not necessarily in the artistic canon. And these, they are all living materials to me. Even if they are not of organic origins, I think of them as living materials because they do their own thing and they change over time. And so for the first half of this talk, I'm going to talk a bit about materials and their different personalities because they're all different. And then I will share examples of my work where I use these properties in various ways. And I'm going to start with some historical pigments, particularly mineral and inorganic ones. These tend to be chemically active, so they react with each other and with the environment. And the first of these, the one I start with, is verdigris, because it is the most infamous one. And what is verdigris? It is a copper, it's an oxidization of copper, and the term is not a specific chemistry term because it encompasses a number of oxidization of copper depending on the acid used, depending on the presence of salt. So it's an umbrella term, but all of them give this beautiful green material that you can see, this blue-green. And it's very mesmerizing, and it's very easy to make at home. Don't make it at home, it's toxic. But it's really, just covering my back. It's very easy to make, and when you make it, when you see it form, it is really mesmerizing, and the color is unique, and the pictures do not convey the color, because for some reason, digital cameras cannot capture the glowing blue-green of it. One problem with it, it is incredibly corrosive to parchment or paper if the conditions are not right. It's really reactive. Very famous example. This is a page from a very rare and beautiful Quran, nicknamed the Carmation Quran, which not a lot of pages have survived of it, but it's really beautiful. And as you can see, it makes extensive use of verdigris. I'm kidding, you cannot see it because it has all deteriorated. It has all turned to brown. And in places, we can't see it in the photos very well, but in places that it has eaten right through the paper. But it was used extensively. It's just all gone. And I have collected about 40 images of 40 pages from this Quran from various sources, and you cannot see green, the single trace of green on any of them, but I know it's there. Two more of these historical mineral and inorganic pigments are lead white, ceruse, and cinnabar. Now, lead white, you can see it on the left. You can see how it looks when it has form. It is an oxidization of lead. So the way it's made is a lead sheet is rolled into a column, and it's placed under certain conditions. And from this black metal, this beautiful white is formed over time. And it's a very beautiful pigment. It's lovely to use. It is toxic, but it's fine. It's not quite as bad as verdigris. It doesn't attack the paper, but if it's not treated properly, it turns black. So we have a lot of examples of art where I think famously also faces, for instance, where suddenly the face is turned all black with time. This is the lead white that has reacted and turned back to lead. Cinnabar does the same. Cinnabar is this beautiful red. It was the favorite red of every culture until recently. It's a mercury sulfide. We see a theme, right? They're all toxic. It's a mercury sulfide, but you see an example of how it's used to make this really vibrant red. But again, very mysteriously, it's not fully explained yet. We don't know why. Sometimes, over time, the cinnabar also turns black. But we don't really understand why. It's quite a mysterious one. As for just the ink, just the black ink, so there are two different historical types of ink. One is simple carbon ink. You take soot, you add a binder, and you write with it. And that is quite inert. It's not going to chemically react, but it's not waterproof. You can literally lick it off the page. Sometimes it's used that way. You write a healing prayer and then you drink the prayer because it's not toxic. But the preferred ink, because it's very resistant, is tannin-based ink. So this is chemically done. It's very easy to do, and it's a very very venerable kind of ink. So you have a source of tannin, and in the picture you see at the top right, the most famous and the most used are gallnuts. They're little parasitic growth on oak trees. The best ones come from the Levant, from that area of the Middle East, but I've seen some around here as well. So wherever there are oaks, you will find these. But historically, many other sources have been used. For instance, the middle one is sumac, and I know you have a lot of sumac in the United States. That's a great source of tannin. Or pomegranate skins. These are just 3 really good ones, but there are so many. And when the tannin is extracted and mixed with vitriol, which is ferrous sulfate, you get this beautiful, deep, transparent black that you see on the left. The thing is, over time, this tends to fade back to brown. And this piece is here in the special collections, and you can see that the ink is not this dark black anymore that it would have been originally. And you can see this even better in this example from the Middle East, because the shapes are very large. You can see how it has really become much paler. I mean, it looks very nice, right? It's quite an elegant way of aging, but it would have been really glossy black in the beginning. And one issue with this ink that we find a lot in European manuscripts, I think, if you put too much vitriol, the vitriol is the corrosive part, and that will eat through the support as well. So you have to really know how to prepare it so that it does not do that. So again, even this black ink, which is quite harmless, it can also not age very, very nicely. So what about metals? So I'll talk about gold in a second, but even metals are really subject to tarnishing or oxidizing. So in this case, silver famously tarnishes. So in this manuscript, which is the Blue Quran, which is very famous and very beautiful, you see the verse markers. You see on the bottom right, this dark circle. This is meant to be a silver decoration. But the silver has tarnished throughout the manuscript, so we cannot see what they looked like. because they've disappeared over the indigo background. Now, the gold here, however, has survived very nicely. And we know that gold is the only metal that doesn't tarnish. That's why it's so valued in art, and it was used a lot. And it really is beautiful how long it lasts. But even gold is only as good as the glue that is holding it onto the support. And here you can see that it's not, there are slight cracks in it. So it hasn't, the friction of the pages being turned has kind of, the gold has suffered from this a bit. And I think in this one they used egg white as a size for the gold, and it's not the best one. It doesn't stick very well. But here is another example that shows this even more. Right. Well, you will be able to see that example in the bookcase over there, because we have it over there. And I'm sorry that the images are not loading. I'm not sure why. We've had that problem with the computers. Use your imagination for a sec. We have a very beautiful Hours of the Virgin with floral decorations. Sorry, I know this is silly, but it's over there, so you can go and see it in a bit. And there's a lot of white leaves around these floral decorations. And from what I've seen of it, I'm not 100% sure, but all these white leaves are meant to be covered with gold. But it did not survive over time. It's not, I think this is called gesso. Gesso is a kind of, it's not a size exactly, because, sorry, there are many ways of attaching gold to a surface, and a gesso is a way of creating a slightly embossed surface, and then you breathe on it, and just the humidity of your breath will attach the gold. But the gesso itself has to be formulated to keep the gold attached to it. But if it's a bit too dry, the gold leaf will not stay there. And I think that's what happened there, because you can still see tiny flakes of gold on that white. But otherwise, if you turn the page, it's like, why are there all these really white leaves that make no sense in the middle of all this delicate decoration? So I do recommend you go and have a look later. So thank you for using your imagination. Right, so far we've seen very destructive alteration. But now I want to move to some more benign quirks of materials. And this is a mineral called Azurite. As you can see, is a very beautiful blue. And until lapis lazuli arrived in Europe, this was the only mineral blue that was available in all of Europe. Now, it's an incredible blue, but it can only be ground by hand. And the reason is really unusual, is that if you grind it too much, the more you grind it, the paler it gets. So if you try, usually when we grind a mineral to paint with it, we want to get it really fine, and we get really excited, and we just grind and grind and grind. If you do this with Azurite, you're going to end up with a pale blue powder, and you won't know what happened. So you have to do it by hand so that you can really control the coarseness of it and keep it slightly coarse. And you can see here a few grades. These are all these colors are from the same stone. They're just washed and sorted differently. So the bottom one is the finest, and the top one is the coarsest. But it has another quirk, and this one is really interesting, is that it's very sensitive to humidity. It's actually a dehydrated form of malachite, which is a green stone. And over time, whatever you do in contact with simply the humidity in the air, it turns back to malachite. Now, this takes decades or even centuries, but eventually it will go back to green. And there are frescoes in churches where the sky is now green because of this effect. And here you can see in some of these samples, which are some that I've ground and washed myself, and then, sorry, the fanciful names, but you can see some of them are quite contaminated with malachite. And I think this is very beautiful, because you cannot grind two azurite stones and get the same result. And you cannot force one batch to be the same as the previous one, because every stone has different proportions of both minerals and so on. And when you grind, also, you cannot specifically control the coarseness. So every batch is going to be different. And I find that very exciting, because it's always unique. Now, let's speak of earth pigments. Earth pigments, or ochres, are the most widespread of all pigments. They are found everywhere. Literally, wherever you are, you can take a handful of dirt and wash it, and you will have an earth pigment. Now, what color it is depends a lot on where you are. It depends on the content of iron. But it's always wonderful to be able to gather some dirt and then get the palette of a place. And I really like doing that. And these are a small selection of all the colors I brought back from my home, from Lebanon. So when I go there, I go to the mountains, gather rocks, grind them at home. My mom grinds them. She really likes taking everything out on the rocks. And then, I mean it. And then we wash them, and then I bring them here, I bring them back, and I use them in my work. Now, they are perfectly stable, absolutely inert. They will not react with anything. They will never change color. But if you look carefully, they are very complex mixtures. They are not simple colors. You will never get the same exact color twice, and they're not one-toned. If you look carefully, you see there are many different tones in each of these. And this happens simply because there are such complex mixtures of minerals that the different densities lay down on the paper in different places at different times. So you cannot have, and there's a bit of silica in them as well, always, so you always have a bit of granulation. So you cannot have a plain, homogeneous, smooth paint film. In other words, you cannot have a boring paint film as you would from a store-bought paints. And since using these, I have not been able to use manufactured paints anymore because they're just so dull and lifeless. And of course, you can control the result with them, but then again, it's not so much fun, and the colors are not so subtle. Now, moving on to plant colors from there. With plant colors, you have so little control that most artists should really stay away from them. I spent a whole year testing a lot of plants for a book I did, and these are just a few swatches because I had to do light tests. So I had to leave these in the sun for a few months and see how did they fade, did they not fade, what happened to them. And if I did this in California, I would have an answer in a month. But in the UK, when there's no sunlight, a whole year was just barely enough. So if I went into the details of plant colors, we would be here all night, but I'm just going to mention two big things. The first is that plant colors are destroyed by sunlight. They are organic. You can protect them, and this slows the process, but it's inevitable they are going to either fade, and if they don't fade completely, they will at least change over time. Now, this is a page in my notebook, and the notebook is there, and you can leaf through it afterwards. Where the swatches on the top row are those I kept protected from light, so they have not changed. And the ones on the bottom have been left out in the light. And there are two famous yellow dyes that people get very excited about, which I really don't, because as you're going to see, there's turmeric and there's saffron. And if you look at the second row, you can see that both of them, they vanish without a trace. They are the worst, absolute worst yellows you can use, unless this is what you want to do, which I am actually going to get there at some point. But these light tests show you a bit how much these change. This is just over a few weeks or months. And the second thing is that plant colors are very pH sensitive. And pH sensitive means that if something is a bit acid or a bit alkaline, it will affect the color. And the problem is that there is no such thing as a neutral paper. If you're working with art materials, they're acid-free. Acid-free means it's alkaline. So there is no way. So you can mix, these are rose petals. And I can extract this color very easily, have a beautiful, gorgeous red purple liquid. But when I put it on paper, you see on the bottom row what happens. The paper changes them completely. It goes from red to green. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's extremely difficult to control the color of the ink on the paper. So, like I said, plant colors are a whole thing in themselves. And this is really there is no way you can guarantee a result with them. But they are very addictive to work with because you never know what you're going to get. So now you have a general idea of how materials might work. I've covered this very quickly. So I'm going to show you some of my work. One thing, kind of one step in this, is that understanding how materials deteriorate has allowed me to kind of retro-engineer some things that have deteriorated, to see them as they would have been intended, mostly for my own pleasure, because I just wanted to see them. Now I'm showing you the Blue Quran again to remind you of how it looks like now, after a few centuries. So there's indigo parchment. So it's parchment dyed with indigo, gold writing, and this tarnished silver medallion. Now this is my recreation. I used the verse of light to recreate it so it can be complete and not interrupted. And you can see the gold that has not been affected by friction. Just as it is, it's very shiny. You can see the color of the parchment, the color of the indigo, how much more vibrant it is. And you can actually see the silver, and there would always be some colored pigments on the silver that are not visible now anymore. Now, let's look again at the Carmation Quran. So just to remind you, there is brown where there should be green. And if you look at the backgrounds, the backgrounds used to be very colorful. There are some pages that have survived where you can still see blue or yellow. And these ones that have turned brown, I think the one on the left was verdigris, because if you look at the page closely, it looks like something has deteriorated rather than that's the original color. And the one on the right has faded a lot. And I think it would have been a red, because red does fade a lot with time. To identify the materials, a spectrographic analysis would be needed, but this is my guess. Now, but having looked at all these pages, I'm pretty sure the original looked something like this. Although I should say the paper would never have been so white, because Islamic paper makers, they just avoided white paper because they believed it hurt the eyes. Which I agree, because if you try to read a book in the Middle Eastern sun, you will soon be like, oh my God, yeah. So they always tinted it a little bit. So it would have been slightly brown or another color. But the colors themselves, this is my recreation, and it is actually a book. So I'm going to show it to you in action. Please work. Yes, the animation works. Excellent. Okay. Oh, please work. Okay. So I reconstructed it as a book so I could make a different organic color for each page, basically. That was what I wanted to see. The text is St. Francis's Canticle of Creatures. It's a very nature-oriented prayer where he praises the sun, the moon and stars, fire, water, earth, air, Mother Earth, and so on. And this gave me a reason to play with background colors. So I used flowers for all of them. Green from iris, red from wallflowers. This is from a recipe I found in a medieval book. Yellow from chamomile, blue is from privet. These colors will still age, but they will age gracefully because it's a book, so they're not exposed to light. And the original book is, I'm sure it is kept in much better conditions than this Quran was. And there's a reproduction of this book in the case there, so you can actually see a couple of pages. And so this one and the previous one, they were a kind of returning the materials to their undamaged state. But in the process of doing that, I became interested in the aging and changing in itself, as a carrier of meaning, as something that can be beautiful in itself, in maybe a melancholy way, and as a way of letting go of part of the work. And also as a way of being surprised, because, as a creator, it gets very boring to be able to make exactly what you have in mind. Like, seriously, you kind of, okay, then what? Why, if I can imagine it and I can make it, then why would I bother making it? It's already in my head. So the first time I brought this in, it wasn't a conscious, no, stop, okay. I wasn't really conscious of that, but it was the first piece I made using ink that I made myself and a pen that I made myself. This piece is called 800 because it's about the letter Dod. And in Arabic, we say that the sound Dod only exists in Arabic, so the Arabic language is known as the language of Dod. It's a nice story, it's not true. Don't tell anybody back home, they'll be very upset, but okay. But anyway, its numerological value is 800, so I thought I'm gonna write it 800 times. But the thing is, see what happens if you look at the texture. As the writing goes, you can see how the pen is getting worn down, and the strokes are getting thicker. And at one point, I have to stop and cut it again, and then it gradually wears it down again. So while I was working, I didn't see this. I was just working, but it's just when the piece was finished, and I stepped back, and I said, oh, this carries an imprint of the work process, and of how the pen becomes more workable, because in the real world, the pen is going to get worn down letter by letter. Unlike if you're doing a font, so this is clearly not a font. Because it's very easy. If you're doing it on the computer, you put a letter and you copy it, and it takes 36 seconds maybe. But when you're doing it by hand this way, these are all the same letter, but every single one is completely different. And it makes an entirely different impact and entirely different image. This piece was in the same series, which I called Texture, because it's text. Sorry, yeah, I know. I have tried to find a better title for 5 years, and I have failed. But this was inspired by the ochres I showed you, because they were all gathered on 2 different sites, and then for this piece, I used the colors from just one place. So it's a single origin art piece, all gathered in one place at the same time on the top of a mountain in Lebanon. And I remember that day very well. I remember every detail of that day because we got there so early that the ice had not melted yet. So I was there with a spoon trying to break through the ice to get my ochres. And it was wonderful. It was really memorable. And I love the idea that each place and each area of land has its own palette. And it can be either just minerals or minerals and plants together or just plants. But every place has a palette. So here, my way of letting go was to limit myself to what was available in just that one place. And the word this inspired is bar. And this is the word that is written here. And bar means the wilderness, it means the land. But if you read it bir, which you can do because Arabic does not write the vowels, bir means veneration and devotion. So I really like how bar and bir are connected together in the language. So I showed you Azurite earlier, and the stone that has to be very coarse in order to be really blue. This piece is called Bravery, and it was inspired by the incredible courage that I saw in Ukrainian people when the aggression started. And the colors are obviously referential, but I wanted to use the purest material possible for this. So the gold is obviously 24 karat gold. But the Azurite, I used the property of Azurite by mixing 2 grades together. So I used one very fine grade to give good coverage of the paper, and I used one coarse grade to get this deep, deep blue. And it's not only deep, because it's so coarse, it sparkles. It sparkles like jewels, and looked close up. I hope you can see on the screen that you can see a bit how it sparkles, but it's so mineral, it doesn't look like paint anymore. It has a texture that it's basically, you can tell it is ground rock. It is very interesting. So to finish, a couple of pieces that are entirely informed by the inexorable decay and change of materials. And this series started after, so I had a year of creative silence where I was so overwhelmed by events in the world, and particularly what was happening back home, that I just didn't know what to create anymore. I couldn't. And then this idea for this series came from my work with decaying materials, and it's a series about loss. About it was my way of processing the feeling of loss and destruction through something creative. And this piece is called Loss, and the word that is repeated here is faqd, which is loss, and it's entirely made in with plant colors. So I gathered a bunch of plants in August last year, for just after the anniversary of the Beirut blast, which was what silenced me really. And I dyed the papers with them, and this will fade. So after this was completed, here you see it just when it was just made, and then I put this in the sun, the British sun. And I left it there. And a year later, this is what it looks like. So you can see the colors are a lot more muted. And if I go back, this now looks a bit too garish. But they're muting, and they will continue changing slowly. I have no idea how long it's going to take to fade. I don't know if it will fade completely. But in case it does, these are all cut out, so there is a depth, and there is a sculptural quality. So it might end up like Greek sculptures that have been completely bleached by time. But the dots that you can see, and maybe you can't see them too well in the large photo, they're gold. They're made of gold, so they are like seeds, and they will never tarnish. So even if the whole composition fades, you will still have these gold dots standing out. And this bit is the note of hope. So this whole series is about loss, but there's always this note of hope that something will survive or even will emerge from the ashes. The second piece, and the one I'm going to finish with, is this one. It's a similar idea, but working with silver. So here you see it when it was just made. There are still gold dots that are just visible on the silver. And the word is zawal, which is the passing of things. And silver, as you know, is tarnishes. Normally, if you use silver, you have to seal it so that it's not in contact with oxygen. And I didn't. I left it as it was. Of course, I wanted it to tarnish, so it did not tarnish for a very long time. But eventually, seriously, I was like, are you kidding me? Eventually, it started, and this is how it looks now. Although I have to say the rainbow effect is much more subtle. It's very difficult to take a photo of this, but if you see the actual piece, the rainbow effect is a lot more subtle, and the silver is actually quite dark. And eventually it will be really completely dark, almost black. But what happens now, you can actually see the gold, and you can see the pattern that the gold creates. So these are the beginning of something, and I feel I've barely started working with these properties of materials, and this maybe is still a timid start. But I want the work to keep its integrity as it changes, because it's very easy to make a piece of work that self-destructs. And in my first year in university, we had a project to do just that. So, it's really easy. But the artistry is in making sure that in whatever way it evolves, it doesn't fall apart either visually or structurally. So there's a tension between letting go and just holding it just enough so it stays together. But there is a different way of working, where the uncertainty of what's going to happen is embraced as an opening of possibilities. And this is kind of where my work is heading right now. So, thank you.
what Joumana couldn't see, but you all could, was what was happening outside of this window as the sun set while you were talking about the transformation, the vibrancy, the transmutation of your astonishing work with minerals, with pigments, with metals. This is really inspirational work and so beautifully explained to us, and so I'm deeply, deeply grateful. And I did try to take pictures that would allow you to see this, but you'll have to watch it back. Okay. And we can all watch it back and then, listen and also pay attention to this extraordinary scene. So we've learned about the vibrancy and the variable density and the performance of these materials in application and the inexorable decay to which I physically bear witness of age, right? Just this kind of the inexorable decay or deterioration or the stability of the materials that Joumana works with in such a thoughtful and intimate exploration of the knowledge and skill that you bring to your work. And this work is stunning and impressive, but it also makes me return my attention to medieval artisans and scribes in a new way, in a very refreshing and new way. So I want to thank you, Joumana, for sharing your work with us, making us think again, and asking us, please, to slow down and look more closely and stop to consider detail, to recognize the value and the vibrancy of the unmechanized, the variable that comes through human effort, endeavor, and emotion, which I think we really learned about tonight. And the idea of the living book, even as it moves perhaps into decay. So we have a few minutes, I think. I know the reception is there, but, we have a few minutes for questions. And, okay, Amy. And, shout, though, right? Yeah. Oh.
Thank you so much. That was just so wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it. I was wondering whether you've ever encountered any of the historical artifacts that you've looked at, any of this kind of intention towards decay that you describe?
No, although bearing in mind I can't really read the minds of people, but no, because the historical art, the historical books were not made by artists in the sense that we understand as an individual artist following their own vision. They were working along a tradition, and the tradition was definitely more towards painting the eternal than anything else. So no, that would not come into it. But I have been intrigued by the fact that they used verdigris so much in Quranic manuscripts to write the Quran, because they knew it was, they must have known. It has these properties of, eating through the manuscript. And eventually they found ways to lessen that. But I'm surprised they didn't just completely stop and declare it forbidden. So I don't really know what's behind that. Maybe they thought it's God's will. It's going to be beautiful, and then it will not be beautiful, and that's the way it is. So I don't know if there was something of that, or if they just had no idea it would do that. I'm not sure.
Simple question.
Sorry.
Why do you wash the minerals after you're going?
Oh, when we say wash the minerals, it's a way of saying we separate the actual pigment from any dirt and things like that. Yeah. wait.
Yes, sorry. I had a couple questions actually. One is about the substrates that you choose and how that affects the changes that might occur if you ever use animal skin parchments or as opposed to papers and different types of paper, et cetera, and what those effects are. And then, of course, quite obviously, one of the effects that you're talking about with these corrosive and toxic materials is the effects on the body of those who are deploying them. And so what are, not just in terms of the potential toxic minerals and their effects, but also the repetitive motion and the kind of precision that's required. And I'm curious if there's ways in which you are also embodying that through your process, how this is impacting your own self, or how you might imagine it might have in some of the less careful usages from past generations, and as well as the kinds of terms and words that you then bring forth to reflect the qualities of the materials that you're using, how closely tied in your choices are to the meaning of what you're saying in the images, the lexical meaning and the symbolic meaning. Sorry, like 8 questions.
All right. First, the support. Like I showed, the support can change, especially plant colors. These are the ones that are most sensitive. For the rest, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter that much. I almost never use animal skin just because it's not very practical. My replica of the Blue Quran was on parchment, and I did a couple. But mostly I use beautiful handmade watercolor paper because I just love it, for no other reason. And then if I need it to be a bit more acidic for the sake of a plant color, then I might apply a little layer of something that is itself acidic, just to buffer it a bit. So there are ways, but they're very, very technical, in which I might work around something. Second, when you work with toxic pigments, there are very simple ways of working so that you don't get affected. You wear a mask when you're handling powders, you make sure it doesn't get on your skin. Very simple, very basic precautions that any responsible adult take. You don't lick your brushes. I don't know why anybody licks their brushes. Why do people do that? You don't do that, okay? But that said, they're not toxic. The artists were not generally the ones affected by these, because you use them in such small quantities. You really have to be very irresponsible to actually get them into your system. So we know of the poisonous effect mostly from from people who work with them on industrial scale, like the miners, people who got them out of the mines, or during the Industrial Revolution when they were painting all the houses with lead white. The workers doing that were the ones getting poisoned. So as an artist, I take precautions so I don't have to worry, because, to be honest, any synthetic paint, a lot of them are equally toxic, so it's not just that. So you have to be, but even an earth color, an earth pigment, it's non-toxic. You can eat it, but you don't want to breathe it. If you breathe it, you can get into real trouble. So just from the physical effect, so you have to be careful with everything, really. It's just about being an adult. I kind of forgot the rest of your question. Sorry. You can catch me in the reception a bit.
So, the disappearing core graph is an interesting proposition. Muhammad lives a life, much of his life, and as all humans do, he dies. He rises to heaven, he rises somewhere, but he's gone. And the disappearing Quran is an encouragement for there to be constantly made new Qurans, new editions. I see that as a kind of blessing. I don't know the theology behind it, but...
Well, the thing is, the Quran is not the physical book, it's the actual...
Exactly.
So in a sense, the physical book could be seen as not holy itself, but the message it contains is. So it is an interesting nuance, yeah. How is gold leaf shaped into forms? Very simply, you apply the size, which is the glue, in the shape you want. And then when you put the gold leaf on, it will not stick to anything else than the glue. Now, this is, it's a simple way of explaining it. Of course, there are so many ways of doing that. That's when it gets complicated. But basically, this is it. Gold leaf will not stick to anything other than where you apply the glue.
Hi, I was kind of wondering about kind of an open-ended question about how these colors may have had a different emotion when they were used kind of in the medieval times, like, blue representing like peace or so, and how that may have changed for you in the 21st century, and what that color might mean emotionally to you in a different way, like blue might mean more like peace or so, and kind of how you choose what color to use in your art, and how that might have been different from the medieval text you're taking it from as well. Kind of an open-ended about, I guess, color to what emotion it may represent for you, as opposed to the other artists.
I mean, it's an interesting question, but I have to say that speaking of emotion attributed to color in the medieval context is completely irrelevant, because that does not come into it. It's not about, there's symbolism, but emotions have nothing to do with it. Where does the symbolism come from can be surprising sometimes. For instance, I think this, I have not verified this closely, but I think this is true. The traditional color for the Virgin Mary was red originally, because the most expensive pigment you can get was Tyrian purple, which was this reddish purple. And then when lapis lazuli came around, and that was more expensive, suddenly her clothes became blue, because, the point of the color was not the color, it was the honoring. This character, you want to give her the best of the best, so you dress her in the best pigment, and from there it becomes symbolic. Or why is purple the royal color, a symbol of kings? Again, because it was the most expensive, so expensive that only the emperor was allowed to wear it. I know a lot about purple because my city of origin, we still have a hill. The city is built on a hill of the shells that were massacred to make this color. So there are some associations, though. For instance, in Islamic art, blue and gold are very much. You don't even need to tie them to something specific, but just visually, the impact of them is associated with that tradition. Now, in my work, sometimes I know exactly what color I'm going to use, because there is a very strong association, and it never has anything to do with my emotions, which actually you made me realize right now by asking that question. But it would be some kind of reference to existing symbolism. And the thing is, if there isn't a clear symbolic association of a color, then I really struggle picking a color, because I'm like, unless I'm using it like I showed you in the piece, because it's the colors from that place. So now my way of working changes a bit, and I have less choice in the matter, because the materials kind of dictate. I don't know if I really answered. Okay.
Hi, I have a question about how you intend to archive the pieces that fade over time. Would you display them with images of what they once were, or are they meant just to be discovered as they are now?
Well, I do take photos. As you can see, I do document. I document a lot. Obviously, the person who's going to end up with the piece will have it on their wall as it is at the time. For myself, I document the steps, and I will always have that documentation available for.
If someone was to discover your work in the future, would they find it with photos of the originals, or would they find it?
Well, if I'm still alive to maintain my website, yes. No. What happens to my website after I'm gone, I have no idea. Depends how famous I am by then. But
what a great place to kind of, bring us to a conclusion in the sense of we're thinking about uncertainty in the handmade, and I can tell you one thing, the handmade will be here for a lot longer than the uncertainty of the digital and the data loss, transient data, obsolescent data, and so on. What is not obsolescent is this extraordinary work. And so thank you for your questions, enjoy the reception, and thank you so much, Judy.